Hey guys, it's Dr. G, and it's another episode of the Dr. G Show. Thanksgiving's coming up. It's a little bit crazy. So today we're going to talk about something that's really important. We get lots of questions about it, and it's about sleep, circadian rhythm, exhaustion, and that kind of thing. So glad you guys are joining us tonight, and as you know, I'm here every week, and this week's a little bit unique, simply because we were supposed to have Scott Spradlin, the Spradlin effect, but he's not here. He belled about a dog or something. I don't know. So if you know him, give him crap. But he's supposed to be here tonight, and he had to cancel, unfortunately. And we're going to talk about a whole different topic. So, given the fact that I have 4 hours of sleep, and I'm jacked up on B vitamins, and I had 10 hours straight patience, today will be very interesting. So, we're going to talk about sleep. So, Amy and a few other people every week, they give suggestions. And one of the things that they asked this week was about sleep. Hey Lisa, long time no see. We're going to talk about why people are wide awake at 3 a.m. So a lot of times on a questionnaire, we have this question that says, do you wake up in the middle of the night? Are you awake at 3 a.m.? And occasionally people ask, how did you know it was 3 a.m.? So we'll talk about that. We'll actually talk about some of the genetics of sleep, and some of the foods that we can do, sleep hygiene that we can do, kind of working through things that are the simple things all the way to the complex things. If you know me not well enough, it's always simplicity cures, complexity sells. And so, yeah, Diana, you were talking about sleep too, I think, too. Two. So this is your guys' time. So make sure today, since it's a little off the cusp, feel free to drive the conversation in the directions that you want to go. I'm just glad you guys are part of this, and it's really interesting for me to kind of see where we go with certain things. And we have like exciting news today, but probably waiting to tell you guys in a week or two. And but it's very exciting. Suspense. So, sleep. So, questions about sleep. What do you guys have? I'll give you while you guys ask some questions. Feel free to butt in and ask questions, though. But I'm going to go through this list, and I think this is pretty interesting because a lot of people have these kind of concepts about when's the best time to get sleep, when you're most effective. And on NPR Science Friday, they actually had this talk about, research, and it was when the most creative people are the most effective. And the impression for most people is that you see them like burning the midnight oil, like that's when people are most creative. But the reality is some of the greatest works were done in the early wee hours of the morning. So it kind of breaks that stereotype that we're used to. And I grew up with, I'm more effective at night, like I'm a night owl, I get a bunch of stuff done. But it comes at the cost of hormones for you. So things like cortisol get exhausted by messing up your circadian rhythm. And so in the beginning, you have this little bit of edge because that extra epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol that keeps you functioning at higher levels, that's great, but it's not sustainable. And so eventually people crash. And I think everybody has been through that at one point or another where you have to kind of like, okay, recalibrate. Maybe I should be getting up early and be more effective. So 9 p.m., that is your greatest secretion of melatonin. So melatonin comes from tryptophan, which comes from food. Tryptophan through things like magnesium, which is greens, or taking citrate or something like that. And B6, which is beans, greens, and fermented foods. Those are going to convert tryptophan into what's called 5-hydrotryptophan, which people probably seen as supplements. And so they use them for mood and sleep. But that's because then 5-hydroxytryptophan becomes serotonin. Serotonin is your hormone that's for mood and behavior and happiness. It's also actually only 5% in the brain, 95% in the rest of the body. So it actually helps build bone, which is pretty amazing. Most people don't know that, but it's carried on platelets through the body. And then it also regulates gut function, which, in mindful class in meditation, Scott was talking about 2 weeks ago. The gut is the second brain, gut feelings, those kind of things. But that's all regulated through serotonin. In fact, like IBS was treated like kind of depression for the gut, but the drugs like Zelnorm that they used to treat that ended up killing people. So we don't do that anymore. We don't really have really good drugs for that at all. And mainly the way you fix IBS is just food sensitivities and stop eating meat and dairy, cut the crap, and it gets better. So that serotonin then, for sleep and mood, it becomes melatonin, which is the hormone most people know for sleep. But melatonin requires SAMe, or S-acetylmethionine, to convert happiness into sleep. And they were tied tightly together. That's why when people are grumpy, oh, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or if you're anxious or depressed, it's hard to go to sleep. So they are tied closely together because serotonin becomes melatonin. And that SAMe comes from the homocysteine cycle through B12 converting homocysteine into methionine, which then into SAMe. So then you're looking at B12, you're looking at B6, and you're looking at tryptophan and magnesium for those basic hormones that run mood and sleep. So then you make melatonin. Now, some people like to take melatonin for sleep, but if you take melatonin, just like if you take any hormone, you will downregulate your own production of melatonin. So the body, through neurotransmitters, through hormones, they work off this pathway, or this process in biochemistry called negative feedback, or physiology actually. And the body says you have these receptors that look at, so they look at hormones or neurotransmitter amounts in the blood, and then they will produce either stimulating hormones or inhibiting hormones. Then that goes to the gland that makes the hormones, and then that will either increase or decrease. If you take anything that artificially forces the body to make more hormone, or to have more hormone, the receptor says you make more. So then the response is to make less. And so while it may work in the beginning, it tends to not work over time, and all you do is increase your dose until eventually you are completely dependent upon that exogenous source of melatonin, or something like Prozac or Effexor, where it's tricking your dopamine or neurotransmitters into thinking you're making more, like serotonin. So then you make less. So that becomes a big quandary of how to fix problems without causing more problems. Imagine that, right? So I'm not seeing any comments. Are you guys commenting? Actually, I saw 2. But if you guys have questions, please post them, okay? Even if it's a slightly off topic, that's okay. So melatonin, 9 o'clock is when things start winding down. So yeah, Lisa Ambien's bad. That's the one where people can wake up and or sleepwalk and kill people, or sleepwalk and eat, and all kinds of stuff. Hey, and Pandora's here. So so at 9 o'clock, that should be where you are doing most of your sleep hygiene. So if you want to work the circadian rhythm to make it most effective for you, that means starting winding down into the sleep hygiene about 9 o'clock. And you want pattern. Pattern is one of the most important things when it comes to regulating hormones and neurotransmitters. Like Pavlov's dog showed that if you create an expectation, your body will literally change the physiology to accommodate that. So if every time before I go to sleep, I brush my teeth, I brush my hair, I put on my pajamas. If I have this very specific pattern, whatever it is, and I keep replicating that pattern, eventually my serotonin will convert to melatonin in a very predictable fashion. But what we do a lot of times is we lay in bed and sometimes we read, sometimes we watch TV, sometimes we talk, sometimes we have sex, right? Then your body doesn't really know how to proportion all those neurotransmitters and hormones. So then it creates a little bit of havoc or chaos within that circadian rhythm. So really, we always tell patients, your bed is for sex or for sleeping, but you don't really want to be reading in bed and doing other stuff unless it's a constant thing. So some people that read before they go to sleep, that's fine, as long as it's a consistent thing that you do. And that will drive that serotonin into melatonin at 9 o'clock. And even if you go to bed at 10 or 10:30, that's okay. Start the process there. And about 2 a.m., surprisingly, that's like your deepest sleep. 4:30, that's your lowest body temperature, which is kind of interesting because about 3 a.m. is your highest cortisol peak through the day. So at 3 a.m., that's where most people that have too much stress or exhaustion when they're going to bed will end up peaking at 3 a.m. and waking up, and a lot of times they can't go back to sleep. So the solution isn't force yourself to go to sleep. The problem is, why am I waking up at 3 a.m.? Let's see. Let me see. Cassidy. Tia says, if I have to wake up early, should I go to bed early, even though it's not my normal pattern, or vice versa? So that's a good question. And shift work screws everything up. So that's out the door. You're just screwed. But so if you want to really try to keep sleep time and wake time as evenly as possible, so if you start waking up early, like you have to wake up early, then you want to kind of look and switch that clock back to where you're going to bed a little bit early. So that way, the kind of sweet spot for sleep amount, according to research, is about, I think, 7 hours. So some people did better at 6, some people do better at 8, but really 7 was like maybe it was like, it was 7 to 9. I don't know, something like that. But whatever's right for you, that's the right thing. So most people know, I need this much sleep. One of my friends, she says that she doesn't get that much sleep. She's screwed. And so there's some people that they are very like, I have to have this much sleep to function or everything falls apart. Hey, Sarah. So, knowing that, if you need 8 hours of sleep and you're getting up at 6, then go to bed at 10 o'clock. That kind of thing. So, does that make sense? I hope that's what you're asking. And the whole goal is really creating prediction. And then Nella, what's up, Nella? So I woke up at 3/4. Oh, 3 to 4. Okay, probably between 3 and 4. To go to the bathroom and then go back to sleep. So that's a good thing. Okay, so good point. A lot of times people think they're waking up because they have to go pee. But the reality is their body should not be making pee while they're asleep. So what's happening is when you go to bed with a little bit of extra stress, then things turn on a little bit early. And so instead of like 5 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning to start making urine, so you wake up and you have to go pee right away, filtering out all that ammonia, urea, toxicity throughout the whole night. If people are overstimulated at usually about 3 a.m., then their kidneys will start to function too much. You'll start filtering out that, 400 liters of blood that goes through the kidney, and you're filtering out all this toxicity, and then the body's like, get this out of my body. So then people wake up, and then they gotta go pee. So it's not really waking up to go pee, but you shouldn't be making pee, so then you don't wake up. So really what that means is, why are you going to bed with a little bit of extra stress? So maybe meditation before you go to sleep, maybe making sure you have the set time, which is a little bit better, but really maybe doing like sleepy time tea, or it's bedtime tea. Like yogi bedtime tea is like the best. So I love things that you recommend to patients, and then they come back and are like, oh my God, that is the best. Like that is a game changer. And yogi bedtime tea is like that. So that might help also. Another thing that we use, like people that like wet the bed, like kids and stuff, we try to tinker with valerian root, because valerian root will help people go to sleep, stay asleep, and wake up well rested. Its half-life is 1 to 2 hours, so that's usually what people need in the beginning, and then they kind of like go into their deep sleep, and they're fine. But they can get extended release or something like that. That might be a little bit more effective. Yeah, so Sarah says, I have night terrors, maybe once a month. So the question would be like, what kind of nightmares are you having? You know, are they real? Are they like, so? You know, if somebody goes to cognitive behavioral therapy, like we had this patient once that couldn't sleep, but they had this horrible incident that happened to them, and it's real in their brain. It keeps playing, and so that becomes that factor that has to be fixed. And that's typically not what I do. That's when you go see Dr. Padilla, who's a psychologist, or Scott Spradlin, who's I don't know what he is. Professional counselor, yeah, he's an awesome guy with all that kind of stuff. Very mindful set. That's when you go, you have to deal with that stuff, because, you know, I'll tell you one case. I had this patient that could not ever sleep, right? And he was just going, it was maddening for him. And we went through everything. And normally it's pretty easy to get people to go to sleep. Usually there's a couple tips or tricks, some valerian root, some bedtime tea, some de-stressing, meditation, yoga. You know, these kind of things that we can implement, and we get the effect. Oh yeah, and actually I'll tell you 3 cases, I think. But one of them, you know, we tried everything. Nothing worked. And finally, the next patient had not shown up. And so I just was like, well, I'm here anyways. Let's keep talking. And about an hour and 10 minutes into that first appointment, he then opened up and said about all this horrible trauma that he went through and how it still just bothered him, like it was really at the surface. And I was just like, okay, all right, I think we're on to something here. This isn't what I deal with, but you need to go to cognitive behavioral therapy. You need to talk to someone who can help you unwind and fix those things. And I think it was a week, like maybe 2 or 3 visits, or maybe even 2. He slept 8 hours for the first time in years. It was amazing. But again, it was that thing that he was holding on to. And a lot of people have these things where, oh, I can't tell anybody these things. Well, that's why you go to a therapist, you know, because you want to unload that stuff that you should not be holding on to. But eventually there's a price to pay for that. And if you hold on to that stuff and you hold on to it and it's toxic and it's just stressful, it's going to cost you. And eventually it'll cost you sleep and happiness and stress. So for him, that made all the difference. And it was one of the few times where, okay, it wasn't really the lifestyle stuff. It was something else, right? There was also this patient we had that was never had a full night's sleep, never slept more than 5 hours a night for his whole life. So luckily, that kid, his parents had tried every possible thing. And that's the cases I love, is when everybody's tried every possible thing, and it's like, but you didn't do this, this, or this, let's try those things, and it works, right? So this kid never slept more than a few hours his whole life, but it was getting to the point where it was really affecting him, and so he was shaking all the time, and it was like it was killing him. And so I walked him through the sleep pathways, and it's like, okay, you've tried all these things, so what have we not tried? And so I said there's 2 pathways which we want to support. So SAMe pathway for serotonin to melatonin. Even though he tried melatonin, that didn't work. But we're going to try to just force serotonin to melatonin. And then through the inflammatory pathways like histamine. So we did grapeseed extract with him. Because histamines interfere with circadian rhythm. So it could be that one. So I was saying, okay, 2 pathways, let's just shotgun approach this thing and see what happens. Holy crap, 8 hours of sleep the next day. So then I said, okay, here's what we need to do. We need to get this stable for a week, make sure you're sleeping out all the time, right? Now we need to do provocative tests and take away one, see which pathway it is, and then figure out why the pathway's not working, and then fix that. And he said, nope, I'm sleeping, I don't care, I can afford these, I'm doing it. So he just did that for the rest of the time. So, that's one of those things, is figuring out what is that missing thing for that patient, And sleep's a very complex beast. It really is. You know, Sarah's talking about the night terrors. I mean, a lot of that may be just that your brain's trying to process through stuff, and that's the way it comes out. And so, again, not the best person to be, I'm not expert on that by far at all. I know my part, that's not my part. But that would make a lot of sense. There's also medications that will cause night terrors, like Chantix. We can get rid of smoking, but you are going to have night terrors, and you're going to want to smoke. So Erica says, can you make up sleep? No, you're screwed. For instance, a person that knows they sleep 8 hours. So you don't really get it back, but you can then start back again. And so when you kind of make up sleep, a lot of times that will then mess up that circadian rhythm. And what we want is patterns and predictability. Predictability is quality of life. So if your body can predict, okay, I need to make this many amount of hormones, this many amount of transmitters, because we need this much sleep. Yeah, you might, like, I only got 4 hours of sleep last night. So my instinct is, I'll just take a nap. Well, it might be okay. Some people do very well with naps. Some people, it makes them worse. Usually I'm worse with naps, so I try not to. But occasionally I have to. I mean, there's life. Sometimes you don't get enough sleep. And but I decided, no, I'll just take, I think, 4, 5, or 6 B6s, and I'm just going to power through. So when my head hits the pillow tonight, boom, I'm back on pattern, right? Back to sleep. So you can't really make up sleep, but there's times where a nap or something once in a while is perfectly fine. And some people, regular naps for some people truly are therapeutic, and some people it messes them up. And me, it'll make me angry and frustrated, and I don't know why, but naps do not help me. I just need to get my sleep at night and be done with it. So, and people that are thriving on very little sleep, they're like, oh, I can do it, but they're riding on epinephrine at the expense of cortisol, and eventually they exhaust their progesterone and testosterone, and like, yeah, you can stay up all night and you can just run on epinephrine, but now your sex drive's decreased, now your get up and go's gone, your happiness is gone, and eventually there's a breaking point or a price to pay for that, And most people, it's about 35. It's getting younger and younger now. So night terrors, there's not like a supplement for that, but it's more of trying to figure out and process through why. What are you trying to get through with that? What are you trying to figure out with that? And is it something that's just trauma response that needs to be dealt with someone like Scott Spradlin or Melissa or Dr. Sonia Padilla, that kind of thing. That's where that magic happens. So I think we've had a few night terrors that kind of work themselves out, but mostly through the de-stressing, not exhausting yourself. People change how they view the situation. Suddenly things are okay, as opposed to just be constantly anxious about everything that you can't control. So, does that make sense, Sarah? I hope it does. And then Amy says, my mom, right, my friend, my mom had night terrors as a result of medication. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's one of the things is, first, are we causing it? Is it something that we can fix? Amy, do you mind telling us what medication? Do you know? Do you remember what medication that was? Chantix is the big one. But there's others. And again, as they disrupt B vitamins, like all medications have basic nutrients that they deplete. So a lot of them are the nutrients that then regulate brain function and memory and mood and all that. So 3 a.m., that's when people wake up, 3 a.m. Because that's where your cortisol peaks. So that's funny, because there's a book called that, right? Wide Awake at 3 a.m. By choice or by chance, and really it's just we cause it. So it's messing with that biological clock by going to bed with too much cortisol. So the way you lower cortisol before bed then would be yogi bedtime tea, ashwagandha, shistosandra, rhodiola, tulsi, holy basil, basically any crazy spelling bee word that you can come up with, it's usually adrenal adaptogens. And adaptogens are great. Melatonin, if you take that, will mess you up. But if you take adaptogens, those will actually allow your cortisol to lower if it's too high, so you can go to sleep, stay asleep, wake up well rested. It'll bring it up if it's too low, so you can go to sleep, stay asleep, and wake up well rested. Another adaptogen that I didn't mention that I freaking love is that valerian root. The stinkiest herb you will ever take. But valerian root really is great. No, I did mention that. Which is funny because I watched Fight Club again on Netflix, and in there Ed Norton's insomniac, and he's trying to get medication for sleeping from his doc, and his doc is like, I'm not prescribing you anything, you should take valerian root. I was like, whoa, that's what I'm talking about. I've been prescribing that stuff for years. Alright, so that's good. Now, your sharpest change in blood pressure is 6:45 a.m., typically if you're on a regular circadian rhythm. So, when is your blood pressure highest when you check it? And usually first thing in the morning. So it doesn't mean that you have hypertension, but you kind of want to figure out, is it lower in the evening? Is it lower in the morning? So if you do it every morning, is it a fair comparison at that point? So blood pressure rises. Most heart attacks, 40% of heart attacks are at 4 a.m. because your heart is beating really hard at about 3 to 4 a.m. And so if there's any kind of blockages, that's when you'll end up with a heart attack, which, hell, that's a great time to have a heart attack because you died peacefully, right? And then you have melatonin secretion stops, and it's usually as the light starts to go through the window, hits your eyelids, it then creates a spectrum change, and then that changes the chemistry in the suprachiasmatic part of your brain that regulates things like circadian rhythm. So that's why when people go to bed, you don't want light on in the house because it can then go through your eyelids and tell your brain, hey, it's time to wake up. So then why am I waking up? People have fish lights, a fish tank with a light. Often it's that simple. Blue LEDs, like sometimes with people have TVs in the room, which you're not supposed to. Sex or sleep, not watch TV. But if you have a TV in your room or some electronic device and it has that blue diode, that will wake you up. They literally are taking blue light, that spectrum of light, and putting it in nursing homes because it wakes Alzheimer patients up. It makes them more alert and more increases brain function because it drives those hormones of awake, which is called the reticular activating system. And when you drive that reticular activating system, you're more alert, which is why you're awake during the day and not falling asleep. And then at night, it's your reticular inactivating system, and that is what makes you fall asleep. So when people are struggling when they're driving too late at night and they're just like slapping themselves and putting their head out the window and turn up the radio really loud, listen to rap music and stuff, hard rock or something, they're trying to stimulate the reticular activating system. But the inactivating is like, you are going to fall asleep on the road, son. Yeah, Pam's got it. Metallica, right? And then if you see a cop on the other side of the road, especially with their lights on, suddenly you go from sleepy to wide awake. Because that surge of epinephrine and norepinephrine suddenly overstimulates that reticular activating system, and you are wide awake. But once that stress leaves, and that cop isn't going to follow you and you're watching it, okay, he's gone. Then your reticular inactivating system starts to say, oh, all right, yeah, we're going to put you back to sleep now. And you go through that same process. So the inverse of that is I can't sleep at 3 a.m. The inverse of that is I'm falling asleep during the day. So that melatonin stops at about 7:30 a.m., so then your tryptophan is making more serotonin instead of melatonin through that tryptophan pathway. And your most alert, or the highest alert really with circadian rhythm, is about 10 o'clock in the morning. So typically you're most effective from about 6 to about 10 o'clock, maybe 11, 12 o'clock, something like that. And that's really how you want to start scheduling things, is by driving that circadian rhythm to make you most effective. And before, we've talked about how Americans, there's a new term for American workers called presenteeism in HR. And that's because most Americans are only productive about 15 minutes out of every hour they're at work. We work more than any other country, but we are less effective. And that's because most people are just brain fogged out the wazoo, and they can't focus and function. And if we pay the price, like we have unproductive people. So that morning hour of really saying, okay, what do I need to get done today? What do I really need to power through? So, peppermint oil, peppermint tea, those things kind of drive brain function, but so does the oatmeal, the raisins, no sugar added, and salmon and greens and blueberries and avocado. Those are all really powerful brain foods, and they will drive greater performance. So we can actually tailor breakfast and the timing with our circadian rhythm to be the absolute most effective we can be all day. And so that's really what you want to kind of do, as opposed to most people are like dragging ass in the morning, and I'm going to get a whole bunch of stuff done and power through later. No, they're not as effective then. So make sure you guys ask questions. This is your time. So if you have questions, comments, please let me know. I'm glad you guys are enjoying the show, and if you would, please make sure you share it. If you find this helpful with other people, like a lot of times these are, free like little infomercials like this. It's good because this is my stuff is functional medicine, clinical nutrition. It is how does the body work, and how do we mess it up and stop messing it up, right? So a lot of you guys had questions over the last few months as we've been doing these talks. Well, actually, were we season 8? I think we're season 8 now. A lot of it comes up as sleep. And so this is a little bit different. Like a lot of times I talk about sleep in a little bit different way, but I always like to say, well, if we're going to talk about sleep again, let's talk about it in different ways here. So about 2:30 to 3:30, I found this very interesting. That's your fastest reaction time and your best coordination. So that would be the time where you want to do things like yoga or maybe meditation, or you would want to do some sports or exercise, those kind of things. Or that's when you do your crossword puzzles or your brain game kind of stuff. Amy says, Erica says, you mentioned breakfast. When is the optimal time to eat breakfast? That's a good question. So many of us as Americans have all these books that give us all these rules, but really it's going to be when you feel like you need it. So some people don't need breakfast, some people need breakfast, some people need it earlier, some people need it later. But the most important thing about breakfast is that you eat things that are brain foods. If you Facebook me on this later, I'll post those things, and it'll have brain food, memory foods. But if you notice, it's all fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes, and greens, so it's not all that complicated. Again, it's Mediterranean diet and Asian diet and everybody else in the world diet, but not American diet. And so I think the less important question is when to eat breakfast, but more how do I eat effectively for brain function. So that's where, like, if you're going to have tea, have a little bit of green tea with a little bit of peppermint tea in there, and it dramatically increases brain function with that 15 milligrams of caffeine or 25 milligrams of caffeine that's in green tea. It mixes with theanine, and it drives brain function so you're more clear and accurate, and you have faster responding times. What's interesting too is they did a high-fat inflammatory diet, so not high omega-3 fats, but omega-6 fats. And people that ate like that had significant changes in reaction time, enhanced fatigability. The same thing when they did like high glycemic diets. They had a dramatic increase in reaction times. And so basically to do the same task took that person longer, and they fatigued out faster. But when you look at what they're eating, standard American diet, if you eat cereal, it's sugar. You eat, it usually has sugar in there, which is like 11 teaspoons or something. That's like, 11 grams is like almost 3 teaspoons of sugar per serving. And then if you have orange juice, that's sugar without the fiber. If you eat toast, that's sugar. The jam on there's sugar. And so in the dairy, sugar. So we eat sugar, 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 and then we crash. And so you can eat that breakfast anytime you want, and you are going to feel worse. You're going to function worse. And then when you overproduce insulin, drop that too low, then you have to raise blood sugar because the brain runs off blood sugar. And then how are we going to raise blood sugar without more sugar? Gluconeogenesis, which is driven through stress and epinephrine and cortisol. So then we end up with general anxiety disorder. We end up with exhaustion over time just because we eat like an American. So that's going to mess everything up. But if you ate, like, for breakfast today, I ate salmon cakes, and then on the way to work, I ate 3 or 4 oranges, and then for dinner, I ate watermelon. So, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just, you can eat a cantaloupe for breakfast, you can eat a cucumber for breakfast. Just pay attention to what I eat and how I feel. And one of the funny things that C.K. Lewis says is that Americans eat food that changes what they do for the rest of the day. And that's the reality. And again, Thanksgiving's coming up, and people will literally sit there and try to eat for pleasure, and then they feel miserable for the rest of the day. That pleasure's gone. You ain't happy anymore. You're feeling horrible, sitting on the couch, sweating it up, it's falling asleep, while the rest of the world's going on without you. So being very purposeful and mindful, like we talked in the other talks, of saying, okay, why am I going to eat this food? Do I want to feel better? Do I want to feel healthier? Do I want more energy? So that's really what you want to listen to. I hope that makes sense. And Amy says snap time 2:30, 3:30. Yeah, and that's if you feel better, more energetic, that's what you want. It works great for you. There's no one way that works for everybody. Same thing with the food rules. It's the healthiest, happiest, longest living populations do not all do the same thing or eat the same foods, but they have very common themes among them. So fastest coordination, about 5 o'clock is your greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength. So again, maybe working out in the evening is better than working out in the morning, and you're going to get better function with that, better results. Sometimes, I would say highest blood pressure is about 6 p.m., but that's not always true. It just depends. And the highest body temperature is about 7 o'clock. And then you start the circadian rhythm again. So you warm up, fall asleep, cool down, warm up, stay awake. Same kind of pattern. Yeah, so Sarah, that's a good point. We're told not to work out before bed because usually it'll jack up epinephrine and norepinephrine and cortisol, and then it causes problems with sleep. But some people, it actually helps them. So if you go to work and you hate your job and you hate what you do, which isn't my job, but you might have an extra epinephrine. Well, the way you burn that off is by burning that off. So exercise for some people will help them sleep sound, where other people it'll jack them up. So it always depends. So like with Sarah with the evening run, yeah, for a lot of people that is going to be a miracle or a godsend for them, so they can just fall asleep and stay asleep. And again, it's just, there's no right or wrong. It's what works best for you, and listening to your body and saying, what's the most likely outcome for this? I know I do my pull-ups and stuff and all that before bed. I don't do yoga. Yoga would be a great thing to do before bed, but I don't know. I try to do that in the morning. It feels like it's a starting out kind of thing for me, not an in-the-day thing. So, but it may be completely different for someone else. So, yeah, so Sarah, it helps, right? So it helps you to have evening runs. That's exactly what we want. Is what's right for you is not always the same for someone else. So that's great. What other questions do you guys have? I also want to talk about some of the genetics too. So there is for humans, like 30 some. There we go. Motion detector shut off my efficiency lights. That would have been funny if I just disappeared and then turned the lights back on. Dang it! I should have did that. Full moons seem to cause me restless sleep. Well, that's probably because you're part werewolf. So a lot of people carry the werewolf gene. No. You know, that moon affects a lot of stuff. Like people's circadian rhythm is affected by moon, the full moon. But even like mood and behavior and function, reproduction, fertility, it's pretty amazing. Like it literally changes the depth of the ocean with that. It's pretty crazy. So circadian genes, there's very specific ones, and I like that they're called period 1, period 2, period 3 genes, right? And then there's the BMAL gene, like 1, and actually sometimes we call it the MPAS2, which is called the clock gene, which is a pretty cool name for a circadian rhythm gene, right? It's clock. So those kind of genes are regulated through like B12, methionine, SAMe. Then when you're like a neurotransmitter genes, so you have your 5 HT ones. So you got 1A, 1B, 2A, 2C, 7, DAT, but SRT gene. But those genes that are regulated through those are actually regulated through like folate pathway. So folate, that'll actually then go and regulate BH4, which then through B6 will then make melatonin or dopamine and melatonin, or sorry, serotonin and melatonin, which are your sleep ones. So that's pretty awesome. So I mean that's another one where folate really drives that, and you want folate, not folic acid. If somebody has a methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase pathway mutation, yeah, the mother fricker gene, right? I love that gene's name. But that one, sometimes people, folate won't help them at all. They need methylene tetrahydrofolate to get that effect. And so that's where you go at the end of that circadian, or that biological pathway, to see if you can force that function to work. And then if it does work, then why is it not working for them? And then figure out what's messed up above that pathway. So, you are talking nerdy above our knee. All right, fine. So, the simplicity of it, I mean, it's not like we're trying to methylate or, what is that? Oh, yeah, there you go. Okay, that's the... At least we're not talking about, you know, how easy it is to synthesize a methylated alkaloid, right? This is pretty simple stuff. Yeah, Donna, blah, 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 right? All right, fine. All right, so what that means, though, beans, greens, fermented foods. Beans, greens, and fermented food. That's the simplicity of all that stuff I just said. Eat beans, greens, and fermented food. So that kombucha is going to help you sleep better. Those greens, the salad's going to help you sleep better. The beans are going to help you sleep better. So that's what that means. And then the dopamine, so the DAT, that's dopamine pathway. That's the gene that regulates sleep through feeling doped. Feeling, oh, I feel fine, right? Well, that again is through BH4, which is through folate, so beans, greens, fermented foods. Interestingly enough, epinephrine, but it's through octapamine pathway. But this is a really interesting thing, because octapamine pathway is, I believe, the reason BT corn works, the genetically modified corn. It messes up the octapamine pathway in those worms, basically messing up their mood and their behavioral responses. But we have that same pathway, so then all of a sudden when we consume Roundup or genetically modified corn, we should have mood and behavior problems, and often we can call that autism, right? So the first girl that had autism, Alexandria, was where they were testing that kind of corn out. Other countries that don't vaccinate, that's where they test this corn out. So we see these like sporadic epidemics of autism, but one of the pathways is multifactorial, but one of the main pathways for that is octapamine pathway. And that regulates B12, and that regulates mood and how you respond. So that's really important. Yeah, collard greens are awesome. Oh, I always forget about collard greens with patients. Yeah. So they're allergic to kale and spinach. Collard greens, those are great. So, histamine pathways, HDC, that's the one that we used for that one kid that never had slept. That's where we use grapeseed extract. So typically we don't think grapeseed extract for sleep, but yeah, I mean, use its antihistamine for allergies and stuff. And then GABA. GABA is a pretty popular one for that. It's in NF, was that alpha maybe, B1 pathway. But GABA is a neurotransmitter that regulates all kinds of cytokine reactions in our body, and that's that inflammatory stuff. So, yeah, so Sarah, grapeseed oil theoretically, because the seed has proanthocyanidins in there, or PCAs, and that is the antihistamine part of that. Old school, back in my day, we just eat grapes with seeds in them, and you'd bite that seed and it'd be a little bit bitter, and you're getting constant antihistamines. That's why it's important to, when you eat grapefruit, eat the seeds. When you eat lemons, limes, eat those seeds. Those seeds are medicine, but what's funny is you take the seeds out, grind them up, sell them back to people as supplements. So that's nice. One other really interesting thing is calcium channel pathways through the genes, like CAV and the KV 3.2s. Those genes can be messed up by those calcium channel blocker medications for blood pressure. So, when we take medications, can it mess up our sleep? And that, yeah, definitely. And that's a pretty popular one to have problems with that. Ghrelin, leptin, growth hormone, releasing hormone, those kind of ones will actually cause problems with sleep, and that's where you get that kind of like hungry, I can't sleep, not satiated, that kind of thing. So it goes back to fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes, and greens. But if somebody has a real leptin problem, that's got to be dealt with. That's a whole different thing. So, and there's a couple other genes that are important for that. More questions? What are you guys' questions? You guys aren't asking me any questions. I feel like I've been nerding out for a while without a lot of questions. Alright. So, again, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, berries, legumes, and greens. Lots of greens, lots of beans, a lot of fermented foods. And in fact, one of the best beans that people don't eat is fava beans, or broad beans. But fava beans have high amounts of L-dopa and mecanoperenins, which actually curb appetite, but they drive dopamine effect. So they create L-dopa, which crosses the blood-brain barrier, and then that helps you make dopamine, which then keeps you satiated and happy. You can go to sleep peacefully and stay asleep and wake up well rested. So Sarah, that's a good question. So canned beans, the best ones are dried beans, but you have to soak them. But if you could sprout them or ferment them, that's even better. But soaking them is great. Lentils are the only ones that you can just use dry and straight like that. And that has like 90% of your folic acid, which then is your mood and sleep and awesome stuff. So canned beans are likely to have bisphenol A. Yeah, so Pam Dora nailed it, right? That bisphenol A is estrogenic. That's plastic number 7, which lines a lot of cans. Now, you will see like Simple Truth and like Dillon's Organic, they say BPA free. But is it BPA free or is it BPS, which is just a different toxic chemical? They don't tell us these answers, so then it becomes a little bit more challenging. So the goal really would be to do dried ones as much as you can. If you do the canned ones, just make sure you rinse that out. And you'll notice foam, that's saponins, which some people have problems with, but not everybody. Frozen beans would be better than canned beans. So sometimes there's canned beans. Sometimes you just, that's the way it is. But make sure you wash it. You know, I usually put the lid down a little bit, and then I would run water in there, and then, you know, turn it over, rinse it out, do that 2 or 3 times. But sprouting beans is like 300% more nutrition for you if you do that. And then I felt like there was another question in there. Oh yeah, one thing too is Amy, you had the question maybe about waking up during the middle of the night. Valerian root usually will help with that. But the other one that's a really nice one that I often forget about is red raspberry leaf tea, or raspberry leaf tea. It's got to be the leaves. Oh, that seems the same. Alright, leaves. So, raspberry leaf tea actually helps strengthen that intrinsic muscle, or the detrusor, which then prevents you from having leakage and dribbling and all that. So, that's one of the very first things with anybody with incontinence or leakage. And it's like, oh, I had 3 kids. Well, great. Lots of people have 3 kids and don't pee themselves all the time. So, fix that muscle, right? You have 2. 1 is at the bladder, and that's called the detrusor. That's the intrinsic one. That's what raspberry leaf tea does. So that says, don't pee myself. And then you have 1 at the exit, that if this fails, you have another one, but that's the one that you control. It's voluntary. And that one's the, oh my God, I gotta pee, right? How long can I hold this? So that one becomes a problem. But that detrusor one becomes really awesome because that raspberry leaf tea often fixes that like that. So if you can drink that before you go to bed with maybe some yogi bedtime tea, like combine them, that may be the miracle formula by which ends you waking up and going pee. Yeah, oh yeah. So Pandora says, is that what they tell you to drink before labor? Definitely you can do that, yeah. All right, and then Amy has another question. My question is, how do you convince someone to drink bedtime tea when they already get up? That's a very good question. So, maybe you could chew it like tobacco. That way there's no more water in there. And it'll be like chaw. Maybe? Well, okay, so one way to do this is just take that tea and so get raspberry leaf tea, and you'll probably have to get it from the health food store. You sometimes have it down. And the key is like take a spoon and bend it so you have like a little platform there, and then you can take that raspberry leaf tea and put it in there, and then use about 1 ounce of distilled water, so like maybe a 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon, put it in there, and then let that saturate a little bit, and then you want to use a butane lighter, so that heats up really hot, really fast. And then you put that under the spoon, and that'll start boiling that raspberry leaf tea, but only in a little bit of water. And you'll notice that starts becoming thicker and thicker. And then you put a cotton ball in there, and then you get a syringe, and you strap up your arm with your belt, and then no extra water, you don't go pee. Right? All right, Amy, I think that's our solution. I think you should try this and then let us know next week how well did it work. And of course, don't do that. What you really do is you take it and you chop it up with a razor blade into like a fine powder, and then use your credit card to put it. Why is it getting frowny face? That's the first frowny mad face ever. So then you put it in lines on the coffee table or a mirror? No? There's lots of options here, I see. Okay, so Amy says we haven't had any luck with raspberry tea. So it's got to be leaf tea. It's got to be leaf, not raspberry tea, just to make sure. And my friend drinks it every night. So that would be making sure, there's no caffeine in that. I wouldn't drink green tea maybe before bed, but it still shouldn't cause a problem. But the bedtime tea, maybe making it a little bit more concentrated and not as much liquid, or maybe drinking a little bit early, just like 9 o'clock. So 9 o'clock is when that serotonin starts kicking in. So maybe drinking a little bit earlier, sipping on it slower, and then go and pee before you go to bed. That might work. I would try to kind of play around and see how that works for you, because you might combine a couple things too. All right, and then Steven says, how do I optimize my focus, not only through the work day, but also evening with the family? Well, so getting enough sleep, having good sleep hygiene, making sure that the sleep's effective, that when you're in deep sleep, you're in deep sleep, and you're not, in beta waves, that kind of thing. But also, really in the beginning when you're trying to work things out, and maybe you're a little groggy during the day, or things get kind of tiresome at the end of the day, just abuse B vitamins. Like, really try to amp up on those. You want it through your diet to where you don't need it, but like I do that occasionally where I'm just like, we're doing research and stuff and trying to get stuff, grant proposals and stuff. And there's times you're just trying to bust ass and trying to do more than you can. Well, that's where like coenzyme B complex comes in. It's reduced form Bs or methyl B12s. And I might take like 5 at once, and I can usually power through the rest of the day and feel fantastic. So, all right, and then Steven says, does snoozing my alarm make a difference? Well, okay, so if you have to snooze, your circadian rhythm is your brainwave cycle like this. And if you're snoozing, and you really need it, like I can't function, I have to hit snooze, and I can't pull it together, your alarm may be set during your deep wave cycle, your delta waves, and it's going to be very, very difficult to wake you up. And so that's where you hit snooze, snooze, snooze. But setting your alarm, so maybe it's 6:30, but if you set it actually at 6 o'clock, which doesn't seem to make sense, but 6 o'clock might be beta wave, and you wake up, boom, like that. Let's go, let's do it. But if you allow yourself to go back into delta wave, it is drag ass to get out of bed and get functioning. So that's one of those places where kind of tinkering with when you wake up may make all the difference in the world. And I found that to be true too, and I was very surprised that like waking up at, I don't know, it was maybe like freaking 6:30 was killing me, but waking up at 6 I felt fantastic. Like, it didn't make any sense, but it does, because it's the circadian rhythm of your brain waves. And then sometimes, like, I do this thing where I set my alarm almost always the time, 6:30 in the morning, nowadays. Nowadays, I'm a rock star when it comes to this stuff. Before, it was trying to figure out what's right for me. But sometimes if I set my alarm at 6:30, and then and I have like Alexa, she plays this very soft kind of thing going on, and so it's kind of nice because I might be Alexa pop or Alexa snooze, and then like it's enough to get me a little bit stirred, and I just kind of lay there and relax and stretch and think about stuff. And then like 10 minutes later, then the alarm goes back off again, and I'm like, okay, time to get up. So that kind of snoozing is good. Snoozing that you can't function, that's not right. You gotta figure out where your beta waves are, and that's when you want to wake up. Okay. All right, so we're out of time. All right, so I hope this was informative to you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you guys were upset because we didn't talk about what we were supposed to talk about, feel free to send hateful Facebook posts to Scott Spradlin. No. So, one more question. Let's see. What did you say about combining raspberry leaf tea? Yeah. So you can combine it with rooibos or something that's non-stimulating. That's probably a good one, Lucy. There's lots of different ones like that, like a hibiscus tea or something like that. But you can combine it with other things. So I really appreciate you guys joining us, or us. Oh, me and Bones. I appreciate you guys joining us. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you found it meaningful. Feel free to post more questions even after this. I'll try to get through and answer those. I know some of you guys posted on one that was out maybe a few weeks ago that I forgot. So I went through and answered all those questions. So getting caught up. But all right, so more topics if you want. Tell me what you guys want to hear about. I know I really like the mindful ones, but like Amy said, Amy was like sleep, sleep, sleep. Some other people are sleep, sleep, sleep. So that's a great one. And I hope we went through this in a way that you found it useful. So keep asking questions. Really appreciate you guys joining us. Please share this with your friends, like it, and otherwise, I'll see you guys next week, and have a great Thanksgiving. Eat healthy. Thanksgiving should be healthy.